Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In today's video I'm going to go over Asmodius and how she works. So basically her entire kit is Gaia. So she's Gaia that makes corrodes crit, and she has a Tiamat passive kind of built in, but slightly worse than Tiamat in my opinion. And she can't be paired with Gaia. I did test her, and this part right here, so every 1 stack of corrode applied by allies increases allies damage boost by 10%, damage reduction by 0.3%, up to 100 times. It's true, it doesn't stack, and it's also named Genesis Glow passive, so even though it's not the exact name, but Gaia's skill is, they just simply copied the name, and it's basically the same passive. So you can have both of them, and since Asmodius is basically a better Gaia with some perks, for example, Gaia has double actions whereas Asmodius does not, and Gaia has instantaneous 30 speed advantage whereas the Asmodius also does, but if you basically pair her with a lot of Mystifiers to apply corrode at the start of the battle, so you reach 30 as well. And on top of that, she also increases allies crit corrode damage by 100%. This is really good. I do suggest getting her legendary runes if you're a spender, and if you're a free-to-play player or something, just wait out for it. But other than that, her legendary runes are probably the best out of the 3 heroes this season. And yeah, as for the bugs, I personally didn't find any so far. I know it's day 1 of the season. By this time this video gets released, it will be a bit later, but I'm currently making this on day 1 of the season. So grants corrode a 50% chance to crit, base corrode crit damage is 150%. This does not work with ethereals, so I did talk about the potential combo with ethereals in her theoretical video, and I did test her with Elisha. So 6-star Elisha would basically make the corrode be able to crit in theory, but since they made it separate on crit, it doesn't work. Crit rate doesn't get increased by the ethereal, so therefore she has her own coding, and the crit corrode is basically its own mechanic. It's not anything reliable, or it's not anything tied to the ethereals themselves. So how else does she compare to Gaia? Well, this entire kit is basically Gaia's outforce, and it's better. Gaia does invincibility only to demonic allies, whereas the Asmodius is every single ally. Gaia does boost also the damage and damage reduction, but Asmodius does it better. Even at 8 stars, Asmodius is kind of better, but at 12 stars, she's far better. As you can see, damage boost is increased to 20% and damage reduction to 0.9%. On top of that, her skills are also really good. She applies 2 stacks of corrode to 3 enemies, really good, and her active skill is also really good. Her damage is pretty big, but that's because of her boosted seasonal stats, I believe. I do think her damage will be on par to Gaia's. So on top of that, she does need legendary runes to match the Gaia speed reduction, but she does not have the double action that Gaia does. That's the only negative thing about her. But she compensates it by basically being better and basically having better passives and having the attack decrease in her kit, unlike Gaia. So what is her ideal team? Because the most recent meta of Mystifiers was having these 5 heroes, or 4 if you were using Lucifer. So most strongest Mystifiers were this. This is basically the strongest Mystifiers you can make in the current meta before the Asmodius existed. If you did not use Lucifer, you would end up using Tsuki, so this was the Fateless Mystifiers team for basically any PvP game mode. Or if you were to add Asmodius, she basically replaces Gaia because, well, she's Gaia but better. So this is how your current meta Mystifiers team would look like. In a way, I would like to also remove Tiamat from this team, because you have Tsuki to stat steal enemies' attack, and then you have Asmodeus to decrease their attack, and then you have Tiamat. So this is a bit overkill in my opinion, so I do think Tiamat could be moved to another team, and instead you could use another Deviant, for example Astrid, for the double actions, or Dullahan for even more corrode. So I will see about that, I'm still not sure, but basically you can never truly go wrong with this team right here. You could even go as far as Xing your Tsuki to have the 9 Mystifiers. If you have not seen, they did make the 9 synergy, although it's not really amazing, but it's pretty solid nonetheless. Apart from those PvP teams, I do think there's room for improvement. Maybe she could be run in other non-Mystifiers teams, but I highly doubt that. And yeah, as I said, the crit rate on corrode is pretty nice, but it's not game changing. The issue with Mystifiers, we are not, when talking about PvP, I'm not really considering anything related to the tree, because the tree makes the Mystifiers probably the most broken synergy at 7 stars. But I'm not considering the tree, because the tree is basically a cheat code for victory. Basically any team will lose to it in against any team. So we're not applying the tree to the discussion right here, but if you were to use Mystifiers in a meta team, they wouldn't really do much. Issue is they are quite expensive, and they have become one of the more expensive synergies, because building them, you're only building them for PvP. They're not that good in PvE, and they do require Eve. They do require Eve's runes. I would suggest getting Eve full legendary runes. They're really good. I did not test whether they work or not, because I'm waiting for the 4th week of the season probably to get them. I kind of do want to do a Challenger's Journey for the runes, so I will test them on the 4th week of the season, or 5th, depending on my time. But yeah, they do require Eve runes, they do require a lot of stuff, even Lucifer sometimes to beat the battles. They're quite expensive, and they're not that good for the PvE, whereas in PvP they're like 3rd tier synergy, right in the Dooms tier kind of. So the first tier would be the Phantoms with Lucifer and the Ethereals, then, or vice versa, depending on who's the attacker, who's the defender, who has the better RNG, etc. And then there would be Dooms and Mystifiers, in my opinion. Valiantors with Pandora and Death Knight and Everhand Diana have not been bad either, but yeah. Overall, the main carry in the Mystifiers I do consider to be Bastet. Her skill AoE conversion to single hit is too strong, in my opinion, against majority of the team, so she kind of carries teams even though you can't see it in the action, even though you can see it unless you check the battles. But she converts basically all Arcane Doorbell ults into a single hit, which could be Tiamat, so yeah. Overall, a really strong passive on hers, and also the pets do follow ups on every single Eve hit pretty much. So yeah, overall a really strong hero, and I'm not sure how else you could run Mystifiers right now, but as I said, Tiamat or Tsuki feels rather wasted in this team, so I would consider getting another Deviant in, because you do want 2 Deviants after all in this team, therefore I would consider something going out. Now, how does the Asmodius actually impact the PvE? Well, she doesn't. So the crit corrode is really nice, but it doesn't really make much for the damage. As you can see, I have been testing Elisha with the crits, but as I said, it doesn't really make much difference. So we can try using the Bastet in here, and we will do the battle. The Gleipnir relic is really nice here, because you do want your ultimates to go as fast as possible. But as you can see, corrode will start critting here, or other actions start, or when the relic corrode damage is triggered, which is a low chance, but it happens frequently because of how many ultimates as you can see, there was the crit. It was a really solid damage, but unfortunately it doesn't really save Mystifiers in the PvE, neither does in the PvP. The reason why it doesn't really save Mystifiers in the PvP is because Mystifiers corrode synergy will actually just kill anyone even without the crit most of the times. And when that happens, it happens when enemy has no holy shield, so something like Odin is pretty much a nice enabler for them. But what also happens is the corrode does get cleansed, therefore it's not all that useful, so they have still weakness of their corrode being cleansed, whether by the relics, whether by the celestial synergy, or any kind of debuff removal will basically cleanse the corrode, and they do struggle in PvP because of that. In PvE this is a bit more justifiable, because there's no way to cleanse the corrode from the enemy synergy. Therefore, Mystifiers could be good, and as you have seen, the crit was quite frequent there, but then again, it doesn't really do a lot in the PvE. I'm gonna go ahead and skip the battle, and you will see I did nothing to this team pretty much. And if we go ahead and replace Asmodius with Gaia, pretty much the same result will happen, so they're about the same equal tier in my opinion. They do same things, but Asmodius just does them better, and if we replace either of them with Lucifer, we should see far better results, even though there's Gleipnir, but it doesn't matter, the Lucifer is just that strong, and yeah, as you can see, it's just what it is. Look at this synergy damage, it's pretty nice even without the Asmodius, so we can go ahead and replace, for example, Tsuki with Asmodius, and see whether the synergy damage gets higher, but synergy damage in the event tab is pretty as you can see, the damage was pretty insane. So here's the synergy damage, but it's pretty fake in the tab, so I wouldn't really count on it, but nonetheless, she doesn't really change much in the PvE for them. They're still mid tier, and they're also still mid tier in the PvP, excluding the tree team. Now, what's the issue with the Asmodius, or rather not summoning on her? Most of the bosses are kind of made nowadays to, or not nowadays, but now to be basically only be able to be damaged by the Asmodius herself. So you will basically do need to have the other team. So as you can see, immune to all damage, loses 1 HP when the corrode effect receives trigger. So pretty much it's the similar, if not the same thing for Extreme 100. So you will need Asmodius 9 stars to clear Extreme 100 with ease. So if you're someone that gets to Extreme 100 without much trouble, and you can't clear Extreme 100 without getting Asmodius 9, I would say it's justifiable, because she can't be a bad hero. She's Gaia, but slightly better, therefore she can't really be bad. She might be even the new hero we play in the most of the Abyss Crusades battles, and in the PvE where Gaia was shining, Asmodius should be in theory shining as well. I can test that because I have passed a lot of PvE, and I kind of make PvE be irrelevant apart from Rift Odyssey and Celestial Trials in the early game. So therefore I do not test it there, because, well, half of my PvE, if not more, is already finished. Therefore it's not really relevant, and the rewards stay the same as if in the early stages. So yeah, if you're someone who got to Extreme 100 and need that Asmodius 9 stars, feel free to get it. I feel like it's justifiable. The hero is not bad, it's not buggy. It does require legendary runes to be on par with Gaia's speed reduction for PvP, but that's really a small thing to worry about. Her synergy is pretty bad being an enchanter, Gaia is better being a protector, but none of them get really played because of their rune synergy. They get played because their passive and their entire kit is really strong. Now, looking back at all of the seasonal heroes, Asmodeus is probably the second strongest. I do think Susano is going to be end up weakest, and Izanami probably the best. You don't have to worry about Susano being the Extreme 100 clear because she's in the week 3, which means it's still the first part of Rift Odyssey, so you will only need Asmodeus 9 stars to clear it. But Izanami will probably be the next lock in the second part of the Rift Odyssey, so Izanami 9 stars, you can get her 2 copies for free in the events such as the Treasure Hunt, and in the other running events such as this one in the Abyss Crusade, so you can get some copies in here in the Treasure Hunt and in the Summoning. But apart from that, she should be also another hero that pretty much locks the Extreme 100 clears, same as Asmodeus. So that's just thing the devs do nowadays, they just lock Extreme 100 behind the new hero 9 stars instead of the Rift Odyssey pets for some reason. Even though we have new Rift Odyssey pet upcoming, I do not think it will be relevant, because you can just get Asmodeus 9 stars and pretty much clear it. So yeah, I think I said everything that is needed to be said about Asmodeus. So to repeat a short TLDR, she's Gaia but better, she's Gaia but she loses out on the double action and the speed without the runes, but she gains up on the higher damage scaling and higher damage cap possibilities. She makes Corrode be able to crit, she lowers enemies' attack under the condition, whereas Gaia just simply doesn't do all of that, but she's quite cheaper and she's easier to get. So it's like pick your own poison. If you are trying to be competitive in PvP, you will want Asmodeus for sure, so you will move your Gaia to the second team or any other team, because Gaia is quite unique and she's not strictly limited to the Mystifiers. But if you don't want that, then you can just simply wait for the Izanami, because I do have a theory that she's going to be the strongest hero, and it will also help you beat the Extreme 100 next part, which is just a theory of mine, but I do believe simply following the pattern of so far. So thank you for watching and see you guys in the next one.